Well, I think it was exaggerated, and there's sometimes never a good time to go. There are always going to be squalls and crises in the domestic economy. So she went over a weekend. She didn't go for a long time. And I think you've got to try and balance these things when you're in a senior public office. Half the task is balancing things. So I think she was right to go ahead with the visit. She didn't cast it as a visit which was changing everything overnight. She was modest in her comments. Actually, the 600 million is a modest amount by the standards of foreign leaders going to China. So I think she was trying to lay a foundation for a decent relationship between the UK and China, one which had broken down under the previous government and become too tenuous. She wasn't saying it was going to be a rose garden, because plainly any relationship with China at the moment has to balance the trade and the security factors. And she did that and was quite open about it. So I think with China, you've got to think medium and long term, and that's all the government was doing. It was a first attempt to establish decent personal and intergovernmental relations by this government in principally the economic and trade area.
So you don't think that the 600 million pounds announced in economic ties with China are significant, are huge compared to what other countries have managed to negotiate? But do you think that this amount, even though it might not be huge, is Trump proof, or do you think that the UK will actually come under pressure for perhaps trying to have closer links with China?
Well, I don't think that the government is doing anything which is not thought through in terms of the likely security and other risks. I mean, plainly, if there's a breakdown in the world trading system because of what the United States does on tariffs in the months ahead, that's going to affect the UK like everyone else. But the area she was talking about, principally financial services, where the United States is heavily invested as well, in agriculture and a range of other areas, they're not security sensitive. They're not going to play into the national security debate in relation to China. So I think what she was doing over the weekend was sensible. 600 million is a lot of money. There's a potential for even more than that in the announcements that she's made. But this is re-establishing links, particularly on the financial services side in China, after a period of neglect and being in the doldrums.
I'd also like to understand how do you think the UK is going to perhaps position itself amid potential trade conflicts between the EU and the US? Because we know that the Labour government is also trying to forge closer ties with the EU. But where does the balance lie for the UK government amid this perhaps, conflict between the US and the EU?
Well, I think the first thing to say for any government dealing with an incoming American administration, and particularly one led by President Trump, is that we've got to hold to our own interests in the medium and long term. And our own interests are plainly to maintain the growth agenda in the UK and productivity agenda. That's the most important thing that we can do, is strengthen our own economy. And a key component of that is the reset with the European Union. Not to diminish the importance of the United States, but let's remember that the EU is by far our largest trading partner, even years after Brexit. Nearly 50% of our trade is with the European Union, compared with under 20% for the United States. And by the way, only about 5% for China. So you've got to keep these things in perspective. The most important change that we can make in terms of our international trading and economic relationships is to get the relationship with the EU on a proper footing. And I don't think that Keir Starmer will want to be dissuaded from doing that by anyone, including in the United States. The truth is the UK does not have a choice. We can't make a choice between the United States and the EU. We need to have very good trading and economic relationships with both, and we rely on both for our security. We've become more reliant on our security on the United States since Brexit, but still, clearly in the months ahead, there's going to be more emphasis on defense, foreign policy, security cooperation with the EU, and that is very important for our government to hold to.